And welcome to the 5th episode of the Pucks with Haggs show. As always, I am your host, Joe Haggerty. With me, my co-host, my partner in crime from Boston Hockey Now, Jimmy Murphy. Glad to have you, Murph. And we were going to have Mark Spector, the senior columnist at Sportsnet, mostly covers the Edmonton Oilers, to kind of go around the Pacific Division, talk about the Oilers, talk about a few other things. Technical difficulties stopped that from happening, so we will have Spector on a different time. But instead, we're going to answer some questions from the Facebook Q&As that I did not get a chance to answer last week. And we may do this periodically moving forward, where we just kind of answer some NHL and Bruins questions that you throw at us and kind of spend some time on the podcast doing that. So without further ado, I welcome in my partner, Murph. Murph, how's it going?
It's going great, Haggs. Favorite time of year for both hockey reasons and Irish reasons. The St. Patrick's season is upon us.
That's
and the
true.
NHL Trade Deadline is coming right up. It's actually 4 days after St. Patrick's Day this year, which I don't remember that happening for a while. Usually it's late February, right? So
no, that'll give you enough time to recover after St. Patrick's Day.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna be at the Montreal Parade the day before, but you know what? Us oldies, we tend to start early and end early on those, so I'll be fine.
Yeah, that's right. Like when I go to bachelor parties now, I share the old man suite with the older dudes and let the young guys go out and get table service and be idiots, and we'll go be to bed by 9 o'clock at night. That's how we roll, Murph, when we're approaching 50.
Exactly.
All right, so we're going to answer some questions here. These were from my Facebook Q&A last week. A lot of them are still very relevant. Vio Chansonnier, I think that's how you pronounce it. Says, what do you think of Nosek? He looks pretty useless in there. Oof. I got to say, I disagree. I think Tomas Nosek has been a useful player, a very good penalty killer. I think every once in a while he makes a play offensively. He's certainly good enough to contribute offensively now and then. He is what he is, right? He's old enough at this point that I don't think he's going to all of a sudden turn into this top 6 center or be something that he's not. But he's a good face-off guy, a good penalty killer, adequate enough offensively, the kind of dependable player that you want as your fourth-line center that's a veteran that kind of knows how to win and knows what needs to be done and helps you win hockey games. I think maybe if you weren't trained to sort of watch some of the nuances of the game and appreciate some of this, stuff that doesn't happen, get put on the score sheet but helps teams win games, you might underestimate Nosek or think he's not bringing much to the table, but I actually think he's a very useful player.
Yeah, and look, he's done everything you just listed, all those things. I mean, those are the reasons they signed him. They didn't sign him to come in here and score 20-plus goals. I mean, if he does that, great. That's frosting on the cake. But he's a guy that's coming in to kind of be a Swiss Army knife and bring some in little tiny important but very important intangibles that you need game by game, and even more so in the playoffs. And speaking of, let's not forget the playoff experience he's gained during his time with the Vegas Golden Knights. So I think it's been a good signing. They didn't spend much on him, so I've got no problem with it. But like you said, Joe, and that's not to knock whoever wrote this and asked this question. I get that, when you're just looking at it in terms of goals and points and wins and all that, and you kind of forget all the little things there that you need to do to win, and he's doing those little things.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people out there, Bruins fans especially, that feel like when you bring in a guy like Nosek, it's blocking the path of like a younger guy, to come up, and maybe a younger guy that has a bigger upside or could bring more offense or whatever, has a little more dazzle to his game. But I think there's a lot to be said at playoff time for experienced guys like Nosek who have been there, who knows what it takes to win, and is perfectly fine playing the role that he's playing and understands what his role in the team is, instead of playing that role and sort of envisioning himself as something bigger or better than that. And I think that's a part of it too. So we appreciate that question. We'll move on to the next one. Joe Bear, great name. A rumor website that I check out occasionally and has been right in the past said the Bees are interested in Brassard and Braun from the Flyers. Please tell me that has no chance of happening. What do you think, Murph?
I think that Braun could be a little under the radar trade acquisition by Don Sweeney or by many teams. I know,
defenseman.
I don't know if it was Pierre LeBrun or one of the TSN guys had reported that about 2 weeks ago that he was starting to be a popular buzz name. And obviously this guy's going to be coming in as a 5-6 or even a 7 that you rotate in and out of your lineup. UMass alum, so I like that there. But yeah, he's useful. He's one of those depth guys. I mean, just like we were talking about with Nosek, he's one of those depth guys you need on the blue line that can come in and provide some physicality and dependability.
Put it this way, though, if Don Sweeney's if Don Sweeney's big move at the deadline is to get Derek Brassard and Braun from the Flyers, I don't think Bruins fans are going to be very happy. I don't think they're going to extinguish the torches and put away the pitchforks that they're ready to storm Causeway Street with if things don't go the right way at the trade deadline. So I would say if that's what the Bruins get at the trade deadline, something went awfully wrong going into the trade deadline.
Speaking of
Dan Ruane, or actually we're going to skip Danny Ruane because Danny Ruane's being a wise guy. He's just basically saying, are you stunned that this many people asked you questions? No, I'm not. I'm like Will Ferrell says in Ron Burgundy, I'm kind of a big deal. So I really am not shocked when we get asked this many questions. I also think there's a lot of curious Bruins fans out there that want to know what they're going to do. I mean, Murph, I don't know about you, but I get these questions every single day when people see me. Like, what are the Bruins going to do? Is Don Sweeney in trouble? Like, I get all the same questions. For a long time, it was about Tuukka. What do you think is going to happen with Tuukka? Like, Bruins fans want to know the answers to these questions. I try to tell them a lot of the time, there's no easy answer here. Like the Tuukka thing, there was no easy answer to that. Like, I had a feeling it was not going to work out just based on knowing Tuukka, understanding the situation, knowing how good Jeremy Swayman was. But how do you say to somebody that you're not sure that Tuukka still has it in him to play? You know what I mean? And still has that desire to overcome everything and to work his way back to the player that he was. And I think that was part of it. Part of it was his body, but I think part of it also was, being away and being retired for a while and being with his family, kind of realized, hey, this is a pretty good life for me. Like, why am I killing myself to get back in there when I can just enjoy family time and enjoy everything that I earned over the course of my career and not tarnish or put a sort of bad ending on a career that was phenomenal, Hall of Fame level with the Boston Bruins, and that he's going to get a banner up in the rafters someday. So those are the kind of questions and the kinds of things that people throw at us. I'm sure you get it every single day when you bump into your normal people, going to the market or doing whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting you bring up the Tuukka because I don't know, maybe a couple hours ago, Joe, before we hopped on here, I was just going through some old things on StreamYard here and some videos we had recorded and popped into one where we were talking about that a couple months back. And it's still, I don't know, man. I guess it's because it happened in season that it hasn't really set into me. I think maybe it'll happen in the off season that he's retired. That he's gone. Yeah. That's it, and it made me think about that. I'm like, wow. And we've been covering this game for a while, and we're both in our upper 40s here, and we've known Tuukka pretty much our whole career. He's been part. So it's while it's part of the game, but it is kind of something that makes you sit back and reflect and look back on our career as reporters when one of these players moves on. And I'm sure we're going to do the same thing.
Well, Bergeron's going to be the big one because that was the first year I started covering the Bruins was his rookie year. So when he actually retires,
that's where I was going to go.
I've been doing this an awfully long time, and that's going to be a change in a big time change in the Bruins dressing room when he's gone too. He's kind of set a tone in there of a welcoming tone that everybody has a voice, everybody's appreciated and respected and welcomed in there, and that. It's really sort of a family, brotherly atmosphere in there. And it always has been when he's been around. And Chara did the same thing. They set a tone that everybody was equals and everybody was welcome in there. And that's not always the case in NHL dressing rooms. I still remember a few years ago when Zach Rinaldo was there.
Yep.
I still remember him yelling at reporters at one point, when we were leaving the room, yeah, get out of here. He did something stupid as we were leaving at the end of and it wasn't funny. Sometimes you joke around with the players and everybody's laughing and it's kind of good natured. With him, he was just being a dick. And like I remember it struck me as we're walking out, because I think I said something back to him as we were walking out and we were kind of yelling back and forth at each other. I was thinking to myself, like, this feels wrong. This is not the Bruins. This is not the way that they act. Like, this is not something. I got to imagine Bergeron and Chara said something to him after, like, the room was closed. Like, don't do that. You know, that we've known for a long time. There's the, you know, the, what they say is the no dickheads rule with the Bruins, right? You know, they don't want bad guys in there. And, you know, I think a lot of that stems from Bergeron and his influence over what goes on with that team. And when he's gone, who knows what that's going to be like. You would think that Brad Marchand is going to carry on in that legacy, but who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And yeah, I remember now. I remember you and I in media day after he had been signed.
Yeah,
I don't know. Remember, and we did a little one-on-one with him, and we both kind of looked at each other afterwards, like, this guy's not going to last here.
I know.
This is not going to end well.
No, he is not a Bruins type player. Who brought this guy in? I still want to know the answer.
Yeah,
I still want to know the answer to that question. All right. Mike Margraf wants to know if Bergeron retires, and this kind of plays into what we were just talking about. If Bergeron retires, who do you think is next in line to wear the C on their sweater? I think it's absolutely Brad Marchand if he sticks around and he's there, which he should be. I mean, if it happens this year where Bergeron says, you know, I've had a great career, but I'm moving on to focus on my family and, you know, my next phase in my life, and he's not back next year, I think Marchand is absolutely the captain next year. And interesting guy to be captain, no question about it. Like, you know, I think even more so than to this point, he's going to have to watch what he's doing and really sort of change his behavior out there. Not the traditional guy who would make the captain of a hockey team. But I also think, like, at this point, given what he's done in his career, even though he's been suspended twice this year, I still think he's transformed himself as a player for the most part. And I think he's kind of earned the ability to at least try to be the captain. But I think after that, Charlie McAvoy is probably the next guy in line that you say, as a young player, if he continues on the linear path that he's on now, he probably would end up wearing the C someday. Maybe Pastrnak too, but I feel like McAvoy is more of a captain type than Pastrnak is. But it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what happens if Bergeron hangs it up, or if they bring in some like star player that all of a sudden they decide, you know, they want to be the captain. Let's not forget when Zdeno Chara came to Boston, it was kind of a wink, wink, you're going to be the captain when you get here thing. And maybe if you bring in somebody of that caliber, and then that's going to be tough because he's probably the best free agent signing in the history of the NHL. But bringing a player like that, maybe it becomes them if Bergeron's not around.
See, I'll disagree a little, Joe, just because I look at it like if the next guy, to me, no matter when it happens, has got to be McAvoy, because I think eventually he gets it. And I'm sort of looking at it from, if you give it to Marchand for next season, and then, you know, let's say he's around 1 or 2 more years, right? Or 3 at best, probably. And then it's like, that's like 4 different captains in a span of 5 years. And it just, I don't know if that's the type of instability you want at the leadership level there, whereas you could keep Marchand as an A there. I think he'd understand if you give it to McAvoy. And the other thing, going back to what you said, is not just the behavior on the ice that Marchand would need to change, but let's face it, man. And it, you know, not rightfully so. I don't think no matter what a guy does on or off the ice, you can't have partisanship against him. There's not many refs that like Marchand, and if he's the guy that's going to have to negotiate with the refs on getting a call, I don't know.
I think the refs do like Marchand. I'm going to disagree with you there. I do. Okay. I think the refs like Marchand. I think Marchand makes it fun out there. Obviously they have to call him to the carpet sometimes, and there's going to be issues just because of the role that he plays and the way that he plays. But I disagree. I think the refs actually do like Marchand. I don't think there's an issue there as far as, like, the problem is going to become, like, is he going to be not able to argue as a captain would because he's the one that's in trouble, or he's the one that's getting sent to the bench, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, is somebody else, is obviously you're going to have a strong alternate captain that steps up in a lot of situations if Marchand's embroiled in whatever's going on, that, you know, the captain would normally, they would normally be talking to the refs. But I don't think he's got an acrimonious relationship with the refs. I think the refs actually like him because we know his personality, Murph. He's fun to be around.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, he's going to step over the line occasionally, but I think for the most part, he has a good rapport with the refs and they really like him. So, he's one of those guys that makes it interesting out there for them.
Yeah.
But like, to your point, I do think there is a couple ways you have to look at it. And one of them is, do you want a guy that's going to be a captain for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? Or were we just spoiled having Chara as a captain and Bergeron as the alternate captain for so long? And that's kind of a rarity with the NHL these days, where we don't see that as often anymore. And it does turn into you're the captain for a few years and then you pass it on to somebody else. I think that's much more standard now in the NHL maybe than it used to be, is that because of the turnover of the league, the natural way things go, that you don't always see the captain there for more than 3, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and one thing as you're talking there that's going through my head that's also a bigger question mark, and I think it factors into the whole captain dynamic and the leadership in the dressing room, Joe, is also, and we can get to this, I'm sure that maybe there's a question on it, is Don Sweeney here next year? Is Bruce Cassidy here next year? If all of a sudden you have a new coach and a new GM and or whatever, or both, that also changes that whole thing because, Cassidy's got that relationship right now with that leadership core. Does that change as well? So there's a lot of factors that are going to go into whoever wears the C after Patrice Bergeron is done.
Yeah, no doubt. We've spoken about this in person, on the phone, and on the podcast. There is a feeling of transition or a feeling of change with this Bruins group that like I've really never felt before. Based on the players that have left before, based on the situation they're in right now, based on Bergeron's status, like all that stuff, it really feels like things could very substantially, seismically change this offseason based on just how the rest of the season plays out in the playoffs. And that's different than it's been for a while here. So, of course, a lot of things could change. Andy Palong asks, anyone in specific can you see the Bruins trading for by the trade deadline?
Well, one guy, and I'll tell you, it's something I heard today, and I've heard them linked to him before when he was with the St. Louis Blues, even back to when he was with the Washington Capitals, that I would keep an eye on, is Zach Sanford. Kind of an under the radar signing there, but I know Sweeney likes him. He's from Nashua, New Hampshire. He's got some England ties. His agent, Jerry Buckley, is based here in Boston. Yeah, good kid, big kid. He won a Stanley Cup against the Bruins with the St. Louis Blues, so he's got a ring. He's got Cup experience. It'd be a good depth signing there, especially considering, and I know all of a sudden you wrote about him today, Nick Foligno is finally starting to fit in and find his role, but let's face it, Nick Foligno could be injured tomorrow. That's just the way it's going for him. So it's a good.
Yeah, he's played 11 games in a row, which is why he's kind of finding his game, I think. But it's like held up as a big accomplishment that he's played 11 games in a row and managed to stay healthy and on the ice, which is not a great sign.
Yeah, so that's kind of an under radar guy, but in terms of a big name, I'm still zeroing in on Jacob Chychrun. I don't know how it's going to get it done without involving Jeremy Swayman, which I think that's a deal buster for them. They're not.
Yeah, I think at this point, Murph, like I was on the fence about that, saying, "Oh, maybe you do have to deal Swayman just because you want to bring in a guy like Chychrun that's going to be part of the core group." But I think just based on the way Jeremy Swayman has seized control of this number one job between the pipes for the Bruins, the way that he's played. Essentially, since Tuukka retired, he's looked like a different guy. He's looked like the guy he looked like last year when he came on board and was just on fire down the stretch.
Even better to it, right? It's more confidence there.
Yes, you cannot trade him. He is your number one guy, and I've banged the drum on this since the first time I saw him at training camp last year, not even this year, when he first signed with the Bruins in that first camp when he was with Halak and Rask. And I noticed them the first couple of days of camp, and I never noticed the young goalies because they never really stand out for any reason. But he did. And it's similar to like other guys that we've seen when they're young, like a Pasternak and, like Sagan when he came up. More so Pasternak because he just like flashed too and really like stood out. Some of these guys you just see. You see what the buzz is about. You understand why they're special and why they get the results they do because they're just really good players. And Swayman is that. I don't think you can trade the guy that's going to be the number one goalie and the guy that's going to take over for Tuukka, even if it's for a guy like Chychrun that could really help you. I think, I put it this way, Murph. At this point in time, I am saying Jeremy Swayman is off the board. Off
Me
the board.
too. I'm with you. But if you're Billy Armstrong, the GM of the Arizona Coyotes right now, or the Arizona
not the lead singer of Green Day.
Yeah. Or should we call them the Arizona State Coyotes?
Yeah, there you go.
Who are you asking for then? Who's the next guy?
5,000 screaming fans are going to be cheering on Jacob Chychrun at Arizona State. Good for them. What an embarrassment.
If you're Billy Armstrong, you know who you're asking for then. If Don Sweeney says no to Swayman, you're saying, well, then give me Fabian, baby. That's who I want. And can the Bruins do that? So here's the thing that I'm expecting, Joe, and they've already started a little. I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe, was when Cassidy said he needs more pricks on the blue line. If you go back to that press conference too, what was he hype? Who was he hyping up a lot? And I think there was a strategy to this, and you're going to hear this more. They're going to feed it to us more in the coming days. I guarantee it. Is Urho Vakanainen, and they're going to try and make him appealing via us to get the word out. Hey, scouts, look, this is a guy you guys should be focused on. And they're going to try and increase his trade value because let's face it, Joe, we both know that his trade value was really down over the last 2 years. And people start to realize that he's not exactly everything he was hyped up to be. So don't be surprised if that's kind of, the Vakanainen hype train kicks into high gear here soon. But I don't know who they would have to offer to get Chychrun. That's the problem. If they can do it, you got to do it. But I say Lysel's off the bricks too. I mean, off the list too.
Yeah, and they don't have that. If Swayman's not involved in the deal and Lysel's not involved in the deal, they don't have, I think, enough assets to get it done for Chychrun, comparable to other teams around the league, unfortunately. And I've wondered too if this is going to be one of those trade deadlines where they're not going to trade the first round pick. They're not going to trade any of their best assets. It's going to be one of those sort of like B minus C plus, B minus C plus trade deadlines where a Sanford, a third pairing defenseman, kind of like Braun we were talking about with the Flyers. The guys that are below Chychrun and Sherratt and guys like that. You're going to come in and just try to augment what you have. Maybe you trade off DeBrusk for a draft pick and, you see what you can do, but kind of knowing that you're not all in for this year because the team hasn't really shown you that they have what it takes to take it all the way down to the end. But, I mean, a goalie like Swayman, especially if he plays great in the playoffs, that's kind of an equalizer too. And I think that's going to give the Bruins, something to think about with the group that they have now. And I think that's going to make it more interesting.
What about Carlo as an X factor that could lure in that guy that they need? Would you move him?
Yes, I would. But I just, based on the way he's played this year, do you think he's going to be viewed by an X factor as everybody else in the league? I think he's not had a great year. He's not really
big contract though.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, but or Grzelcyk, I think I think teams probably would be more interested in Matt Grzelcyk than Brandon Carlo, to be honest with you.
Right now, yeah.
And I think that's a consideration, but once you start talking about that, you're significantly altering the DNA of the team, and are you weakening one spot to strengthening another? You know what I mean? Are you really is it a lateral move, or are you actually doing anything significantly boost the team's Stanley Cup chances? So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But as I said before, and as we've talked about a few times, a lot of uncertainty with the Bruins this year, like never before, as to long-term and short-term, what direction they're headed in. Chris McLaughlin wants to know, is it time for Don Sweeney to move on?
I can't answer that question right now. I can't. Sorry. There's just too much that could happen in the next few months to determine that.
Yeah, it's a tough question. He's had good moves and bad moves. He's certainly had stuff you can criticize that has happened, and he's had moves that were the right move that didn't work out through circumstances beyond his control. Like Rick Nash is one that I certainly think about, where he gave up a lot. The defenseman they traded to the Rangers certainly could help them now if he was still in their ranks. And the first round picks that they've traded away has helped deplete the prospect cupboard. And that's really, I think, the main thrust of what I look at now. Obviously the 2015 draft's always going to be there. and kind of hanging around the necks of the scouting staff and Don Sweeney and Cam Neely. Like it's there for all of them that they didn't do better in 2015 with those 3 first-round picks in a loaded draft, that loaded first round. But I look more at the inability to draft impact players and to draft players that they're sort of that, that are now pushing for jobs. There's not enough of those guys, and even the guys that they do have, they don't really give enough time to see if they can do the job. Like, why is Oscar Steen not with the team anymore? He has 1 or 2 games you don't like, and then all of a sudden you send him down to Providence when you said he's won a job. Like, what the hell's going on there? Stuff like that. Jack Studnicka getting 2 and 3 game shots and then getting sent back down. Like those are the things right now where I just don't understand what the grand scheme is and what they're trying to do, because they need some of those young guys on this roster and in this lineup to augment and to bring energy and youth and a certain level of a special quality where young players, you don't know how good they're going to be. You don't know the next guy that's going to be Brad Marchand, who you have as a 3rd, 4th line guy, and all of a sudden becomes a special player and an impact player. And the only reason he became that is because in 2010-11 you said he's staying, he's going to be on the 4th line, and then he worked his way up to playing with Mark Recchi and Patrice Bergeron that very season. And, I saw a lot of parallels between Oscar Steen and Brad Marchand. I'm not saying that Oscar Steen was going to be that kind of offensive player, but I think you needed to give him more time, and they didn't, and they sent him back down. And those are the situations I think you look at. And, people are pointing to Donato and Danton Heinen and other players that they've traded away that are having decent seasons. I still don't really care about those two.
Really?
What's that?
Donato's not. I mean, he's on what?
No, he's fine. Right.
He's all right, but he's on his 4th team since they traded.
That's what I mean. Like, I'm not hot to trot about any of that stuff. Like, even Heinen he's having a good year in Pittsburgh. Like, that's fine. But he had plenty of time to establish himself here, and he never did it.
Yeah.
And opportunity. But I just think when you look at the assets that the Bruins don't have to win a Stanley Cup right now, or get a really good player at the trade deadline to help push them over the top for the Cup, and you look at the situation they're in with over the next couple of years when Marchand and Bergeron age out, like what they're looking at is going to be very lean, and I think that's the time when they're going to be looking at, should we change leadership? Should we change strategies? Should we go in a different direction? And I think that time's coming, whether it comes this offseason when Patrice Bergeron, if he retires and moves on, whether it's in a couple years when that happens. When number 37 retires, I think there are going to be changes with this Bruins organization. And I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm sorry. This horse just won't die. And that's a 2015 draft. So
yeah.
You look back at that, he could only escape it so long. And it just keeps coming back to haunt him. And I think in the last year or 2, maybe even 3, if you're the Jacobs right now and you're looking at what could have been versus what is, if he doesn't botch that draft and the time he's had to kind of look, yeah, he's made the playoffs plenty of times. They took him Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final in 2019. I think Don Sweeney's done overall a good job. But
they win in 2019 if they don't screw up that draft.
They win before that.
They do. Right? At the very least, they have one more Stanley Cup.
This year, they win last year. They win a lot of years. They
Yeah.
become the Blackhawks. That's what they become.
Maybe. But I think they'd even take the one Stanley Cup. I think you can say with virtual certainty that they would have won in 2019 if they had any of those players that they bypassed instead of taking Jakobs, Borrell, and Zach Senyshyn.
Yeah. That's just a fact, and that's something he's going to have to live with.
All right, but he's to the detractors. Don Sweeney's made plenty of good moves, good trades at the trade deadline, impact trades. Brought in Taylor Hall, didn't give up a first-round pick last year at the deadline. The Rick Nash deal should have worked if he, didn't become damaged goods and retire early. There's a lot at play there. But I think the draft and development thing is the one thing you look at and say that needs to be better. There's no question about it. Bill LeBlanc asks, what is needed to make a serious playoff run for this Boston Bruins team?
Well, I think what we just said, you need that top four lefty there, like a Chikrin or somebody like him. And, obviously the second line center thing. But if I'm going to choose one or the other, I'm going with the top 4D there.
I think they could be okay with Haula playing center between Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak. At this point, I've seen enough to say, like, he's playing the role that he needs to play. He's been a pretty good 200-foot center, two-way center. He's kicked in offensively at times. He certainly played much better since he's been put in that role. And I'm comfortable with him there. I think that the one need that they have is somebody else that can play big minutes, playoff situations like McAvoy does, play offensive situations, and can take hits, is going to be able to play 25 minutes a night in the playoffs and not get hurt. And, Chikrin's that kind of – they need that level of player. They need that level of defense. What's that?
Derek Forbett is not that guy.
And Matt Grzelcyk's not that guy either.
I'm wrong on him. I'll admit it now. I totally was wrong on him. He has been an absolute nightmare.
Well, and people from Winnipeg warned us. I certainly got plenty of people from Winnipeg on my social media telling me, trust me, Forbort's not that good. And, he is what he is, right? He's a stay-at-home defenseman. He'd be fine as a bottom-pairing guy, I think, that slugs it out, blocks shots, kills penalties. But he's not, he's not the guy that's going to defend teammates. He's not the guy that's going to really be able to move the puck much. He's not the guy that's going to play mistake-free hockey. What's that?
I mean, I don't think he has good puck smarts either. He just doesn't have the instinct of what's going on out there. So many blind passes across the middle, and now they're turning into goals for the other team. Yep.
No, I agree. Tina Marie. Hey, Tina. Do you think the Coyle line with Smith and Frederick should be called the Crash and Bash line? Crash and Bash. I don't know. Yeah, why not? Aren't they 11, 12, 13? Aren't they the numeric line or something like that?
That works. I don't know.
I think they are.
That line stick together. That's the thing. I don't know. We'll see.
No, I know. I think by rule, you have to be a line that actually plays like half a season together before you get something named after you. But I think we've got to work something out with the 11, 12, 13. Maybe it's sequential line. I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah.
Mark Chundley. What do the Bruins need? All right, we already answered that. Christopher Tetro. I hear a lot of talking heads saying the Bruins should keep their first-round pick. I don't understand this if it's for a guy like Chikrin. Would a package like that first, a third, Studnicka, DeBrusk, and Riley get you both Chikrin and Kessel? All right, let me tell you right now, I don't think the Bruins want Phil Kessel. I don't think the Bruins are going to trade for Phil Kessel. I think the Bruins have already had the Phil Kessel experience, and I don't think they're interested in bringing him back, even if it's for a modest draft pick and the Arizona retains half the salary. I don't think he's a need, and I don't think he's a player that they want. So the Bruins fans need to, I think, disavow their love of Phil Kessel and wanting to bring him back home and come full circle.
WEI.
Yeah, exactly. But if I'm the Bruins, and this is a season that I have serious doubts as to whether I'm actually going to be a contender or not, like a real contender, I'm not giving up my first-round pick.
Yeah. No, I'm not doing it.
John Doyle, any real chance of the Bruins adding any grit and toughness, especially on D, or are they happy with the newest heavy line? Coach seems to finally think they need it.
I like it. I mean, I see, that's something maybe I think gets addressed a little more. Like if they can't do these big acquisitions, then maybe they look into being a little more heavy, so to speak. But as we were referencing earlier, if Foligno can keep this up, then they've got that. So we'll see. Yeah. I don't know.
Who would have thought that Foligno would be an important presence or an important piece? But like I wrote in the thing today, this is the time of year when the veteran guys, especially the ones that have struggled like Foligno, start to step up and you notice them more. The games are starting to slow down. Players are getting tired and beat up after playing a long season. The action starts to slow down and get more intense, and the battles get tougher and more prevalent. And winning those battles becomes more about, actually winning hockey games. And I think that's where Foligno comes into play as a more important figure. And they absolutely need him in the lineup and need what he brings. And I'm just not sure you're going to be able to get that by trading for a guy. Maybe there's a defenseman out there you can bring in, or if you trade for a Delorier, from Anaheim, he's going to bring in a presence, even more of a presence like that. What's that?
Josh Manson wouldn't be bad.
Yeah. Yep. He's a right shot D though. That's the only problem with him. You'd have to figure out a way to get him in there. Dan McDuff, any more Nesson fire evacuations in the foreseeable future?
Who knows, man? Just add it to the chapter in Jack Edwards' adventures.
Oh, how he didn't turn that into some sort of historical diatribe about the founding fathers and the Declaration of Independence is beyond me. What they should have done is what they did. I remember listening to the radio once, and they had to evacuate the studios where WZLX was. So they played like the 20-minute version of Whipping Post while they evacuated the studio and just left it on play the entire time. That's probably what they should have done at Nesson, is just put on Whipping Post in the background while the hockey was going on for 20 minutes while they had –
Put on Nutty, the old Nutty song.
Yes, exactly. All right. We're going to end on this, Marv. We've got a question from Bob Stump Haggerty. I didn't even see this.
All right, Stump.
That's my dad, by the way. Your mom wants to know if Marchand suspensions will keep him out of the Hall of Fame forever.
Ooh, I think it's a very good question. I
could
see it happening. I think that's to be determined. I don't think that's a crazy question to ask at all. I think that could very well happen. Look at some of the other things that keep people out of Hall of Fames in sports, Joe. I mean, look at some of the stuff that, like some of the guys that aren't there right now that didn't have his track record in terms of disciplinary action. Why is Rick Middleton not in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's just unreal, right? And Rick Middleton never did any of the things that Brad Marchand did. So that's a great question.
You know what, though? And we're going to have to look at this. I don't know how many times Rick Middleton finished in the top 5 for like Hart Trophy or anything like that. We'll have to look.
Yep.
When you go by top 5 finishes in the Hart Trophy, which Marchand's now done a couple of times and, may do a few more before he retires. When you look at the Stanley Cup ring, which that's another thing Nifty did not have with the Bruins. When you look, I think, honestly, and it's weird that I say this and it's weird to think it, but I think the suspensions, I think the way that he plays, I think it makes him more of an iconic player in his era than it hurts him. I think he's going to be remembered as one of the greats, one of the great pests of all time, one of the great agitators, and probably will be remembered doing it better than anybody else, and certainly doing it better at a time when, less was allowed in the league than ever before. And honestly, I think when you're going to look at it, and usually my criteria for the Hall of Fame is was he one of the dominant and best players of his era? And Marchand on every level is that, and he impacts the game in so many different ways. There is definitely going to be a faction of voters and a faction of the Hall of Fame people who are probably going to hold it against him. But I think it might be less than you think. And I think, it's funny to say this, but he's going to be he's got more suspensions than anybody else in NHL history. He's been fined more than $1 million. He's done it. He's done that better than anybody else in the history of the league too. If that's not like a Hall of Fame sort of, a Hall of Fame pest, I don't know what is. So I don't think it's going to hurt him. I think he'll end up getting into the Hall of Fame. He's definitely going to have the 63 up in the rafters. He's going to have a few more good years, obviously, but I think he's put himself in a position where he's going to get all that stuff despite his track record.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it could play a role. I agree with everything you say there, that maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually, in turn, ironically helps him. But I think one thing that could help him when we're talking about all the suspensions is that he was still able to be a dominant player despite all the games he missed for being suspended. Despite that hanging over his head, he was still able to do that. So maybe that's how you look at it and say, look, he found himself in a lot of hot water, but he was still able to overcome that and be the player he is. So maybe, in the end, that's what gets him in.
Either way, Murph, it's going to be a really interesting Hall of Fame speech if he does get in. I'm looking forward to watching that up in Toronto with you, my friend.
Joe, and I know your answer, but, I'm sure people have asked you, is Tuukka Rask a Hall of Fame goalie?
He's not. Nope.
Okay, then is Henrik Lundqvist?
He's borderline, but I think I would give it to him. I don't think he played consistently on as good a teams as Rask did, and I think there's other ways to break down the numbers where I think Henrik fares better in some categories and in some instances, like Vezina Trophy voting, by the way. I think the criteria I mentioned about Hart, I'm pretty sure Lundqvist was a finalist for the Vezina at least 3 or 4 times over his career. Tuukka, I think it was twice. Might have even been 5 times for Henrik Lundqvist. He had more than 1 or 2 great seasons. He had a handful of great seasons. Rask was really, really great once or twice. And, when you break down dominant players in the era, that's one of the things that I look at. And when you look at that specific criteria, Lundqvist steps to a different level than Tuukka does. But I understand when you look numbers side by side, they're very similar, and I understand why people are going to make that argument. But, it would have been a slam dunk, I think, for Tuukka to be a Hall of Famer if he won the Cup. I would say he's borderline now, but I'm not sure that he gets in.
Yeah, we'll see. I agree.
Either way, I'm looking forward to Marchand's Hall of Fame speech someday when we're up in Toronto watching it and having some laughs with him. So we'll think about that at this point, and we're going to leave this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for tuning in, and we will be back next week with a regularly scheduled episode and a fun guest along as well, as long as there's no technical difficulties. Right, Murph?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we'll see you at the rinks, my friends.